Today I'm going to do a video that I've been both dreading and looking forward to. It's a big one. It's the gray rock method. I'm going to go over what it is, what it's used for, what it's not used for, and I'm also going to go over some specific examples of exactly how you can use the gray rock method in your life. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I am not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. If you're watching this video, I'm guessing that you've probably heard of the gray rock method, but just to quickly go over a basic idea of what it is. The term gray rock is thought to have originated in a blog post or an article on lovefraud.com by a semi-anonymous author named Skylar, S-K-Y-L-A-R. The article was posted in 2012, so it's fairly recent. And if you read the original article, I feel like the purpose and intent and use of gray rock is a little bit different than what Skylar had in mind. The primary intent in the original article seems to be encouraging a malignant, narcissist, or otherwise toxic, manipulative person to get bored with you and leave you alone by taking on the persona and all the excitement of a, quote, gray rock. I look at it a little bit differently. I don't think that the gray rock method, as it's evolved over the years, is really put to best use by trying to control the behavior of others. And I also think that there is a little bit of danger in using the gray rock method in order to get someone to leave you alone. Not to say that it's useless or that there's not a place for that or that's not always an effective method to get someone to leave you alone. But I think that we need to be careful when we do that with certain toxic, manipulative, potentially dangerous people. And I'll get into that later in the video. To me, the gray rock method is something that you can use to keep your own sanity. It's a way of creating a boundary. It's a way of putting up protective walls between you and somebody that is purposefully trying to provoke you, trying to start some kind of emotional storm in your head. Gray rock can be used for people that are annoying, people that like to stir up trouble, that like to provoke you, all the way to people that are abusive, potentially dangerous, and extremely toxic. And of course, everything in between. The way I see it, gray rock is a way to protect yourself against an emotional assault, against someone that's purposefully trying to create chaos in your life. With particularly toxic, narcissistic individuals, in my opinion, no contact is always the best method, but it's not always feasible. Sometimes the behavior of the toxic individual isn't quite bad enough to justify cutting the relationship off completely if that person is maybe a parent or a sibling. And sometimes with a particularly toxic individual, maybe we have a child with that person and we don't have a choice. We can't cut contact off completely. This is where gray rock can really be a very useful tool, a very useful coping tool for us. While I am going to get into some specific examples of exactly how to do gray rock or exactly how I have done it in the past, I'm first going to talk more about the spirit of gray rock, because gray rock to me isn't so much a list of how-tos so much as it is a frame of mind. If you really understand gray rock and you understand the purpose of it, or in my opinion, the best purpose for it, you won't really need a specific list of how-tos and certain phrases to use and not use, because you'll understand the spirit of it. You'll be able to put yourself in that frame of mind, and the way that you can behave in order to use gray rock will come more naturally to you. I want it to be clear that gray rock can be dangerous, and it's not to be taken lightly when it is implemented suddenly with someone who has grown accustomed to being able to provoke you and being able to basically use you as an emotional punching bag. Somebody that's been using you to regulate their own emotions may not react well when you suddenly go gray rock on them. And I just want to say that a little earlier in this video, just in case you don't make it to the end, but I'm going to go a little bit more into that later. So to explain the spirit of gray rock, the mind frame of gray rock, I want to kind of take you into the experience in which it can be used for. If you've dealt with a manipulative, toxic, narcissistic individual, you've likely been in situations where your emotions have been provoked. And I want you to kind of put yourself in that space. Imagine the feelings that you start to feel when you are being accused of things that you haven't done. When somebody is lying to you and they're spinning you in circles and they're turning the narrative around on you, when they're gaslighting you, when they're putting you in a situation in which you feel like you need to defend yourself, and no matter how much you try to defend yourself, the situation seems to be escalating. This causes a rise in emotions, and I want you to think about that. When you are trying to communicate, but you're getting provoked, and for me, it almost feels like the emotions are rising up in my throat. And the more I try to explain myself or try to communicate, I almost feel like I'm drowning. Like the emotions are actually rising in me and making it much more difficult to communicate, making me more upset, and really kind of pulling me down in a sort of whirlpool of emotions. When we enter this kind of zone in a conversation with a narcissistic or otherwise toxic individual, it's pretty rare that we're ever going to be able to finish that attempt at communication successfully, because we're typically not dealing with somebody that is interested in what we're trying to say. We're not dealing with someone that's interested in coming to an agreement or an understanding. We're actually dealing with someone whose goal it is to create that rise in emotion in us, whose goal it is to upset us. And there's many reasons for that, but it's very important to not lose sight of the purpose of what's happening. Say that this person has accused you of cheating on them or lying to them, and you know you haven't. And you're becoming more and more upset the more that you try to explain to them and convince them, I haven't done these things you're accusing me of. When you don't understand that the person you're talking to knows the truth, they know that you didn't do what they're accusing you of, and that that's not why they're accusing you of whatever it is they're accusing you of. When you understand that the purpose is not to accuse you of something they believe you've done and call you out on it, the purpose is to upset you. And there you are getting upset. It's pretty hard to accept that when you're with someone that you trust and love and that you think cares about you and that you think is a reasonable person. It's really hard to see that. Even though it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly, it's still really hard to wrap your head around the idea that someone that you love and trust could be accusing you of things and insulting you in ways that they don't believe what they're saying, but they are simply trying to upset you. They're just trying to upset you just for the sake of upsetting you. When you understand that those rise in emotions are the goal of the conversation, I think that you'll have an easier time getting into the mind frame of gray rock. This escalation of emotion takes two people to feed off of. It's kind of like throwing a ball back and forth. This emotion can't grow if both of you aren't throwing the ball back and forth to each other. Gray rock is a method of not throwing the ball back when it's thrown to you. In the original article I mentioned on lovefraud.com, the sort of motto of the idea of gray rock was be boring. The way that I see it and the way that I have used it is more of don't react. Don't allow someone to emotionally provoke you when emotional provocation is the whole goal of the conversation. and recognize when that's the case. When you stay calm in a situation in which someone is trying to upset you, you control the conversation. You keep the upper hand. And when you're dealing with a toxic or otherwise manipulative, narcissistic person, there's this idea that you should be able to defend yourself. And of course, you should be able to defend yourself, but the idea of defending yourself can be one which is actually very counterproductive. And that is to argue, to stand up for yourself, to throw the ball back when it's thrown to you. This is exactly the wrong thing to do, because this is the whole purpose of the communication, is to upset you and to get you to engage and to get you to defend yourself and stand up for yourself. To truly stand up for yourself in this sort of situation is to catch the ball and not throw it back. To recognize that the insults and the accusations are meant to provoke you, and to not allow yourself to be provoked. Once you try to emotionally defend yourself, you've already played into their game, you've already lost, you've already allowed them to accomplish their objective. Pathological narcissists are bored. They are extremely bored people, and they don't experience boredom in the same way that normal people do. They will provoke you just to alleviate boredom, just so that they can feel alive, just so that they can feel like there's something of entertainment value or something of worth in the relationship to keep things exciting. They don't find love and connection to be of any worth. So to them, part of what they should get out of a relationship is a little bit of excitement. And if a little bit of excitement is a little bit of drama, then that's what they're going to go after. They have no empathy for the pain and distress that this can cause you. They don't even think about it. It's not even a thing to them. If they're bored and they want to entertain themselves, or if they're feeling a little out of control, or if they're feeling a little bit insulted and they want to put themselves back on top by bringing you down, that's all that matters to them. That's their objective, and they're going to use you as an emotional toilet in order to accomplish their goals. I know for me, gray rock was much easier to do when I understood this, partly because this made me very angry, which is kind of counterintuitive, that the angrier I got, the easier it was for me to remain calm and keep in control of my emotions, because I knew that the loss of control was what the person that was provoking me was after. That's what they wanted. And by withholding that and by staying calm, that was something that was going to bother them and be more of a jab than anything that I could possibly say. I guess you could say that I became aggressively calm. Okay, so what are some specific examples of what I mean when I talk about gray rock? I want you to remember that the name of the game is not to react, not to defend yourself, not to show any sign that you've become emotional or that they have upset you in any way. So let's use this as an example. Let's say that you spent the last hour cleaning the kitchen floor. You swept and mopped and you really worked hard on it and you feel like you did a really good job. It's nice and clean, okay? And let's say that a narcissist bursts into the room a little bit later and starts yelling at you that you didn't clean the floor the way they asked, you used the wrong kind of soap, you missed a spot in the corner, what's wrong with you, were you raised in a barn, how lazy are you, who taught you how to clean a floor, all these things. Normally, you would start defending yourself. You'd become upset and you'd start saying, I just spent the last hour cleaning the floor. What do you mean it's dirty? Don't yell at me. Stop insulting me. Don't talk to me like that. These would all be normal reactions. And this argument would grow and grow and grow as everything that you say back would just create more argument, more insults, more accusations. What you need to understand in this scenario is that the narcissist can see that the floor is perfectly clean. The narcissist doesn't even care whether or not the floor is clean or not. The narcissist doesn't actually have an opinion about how good of a job you've done. The whole point of this conversation is to upset you. When they saw that you had just cleaned the floor, they didn't think to themselves, wow, she did a really awful job. I better go yell at her for doing such a terrible job cleaning the floor. No, they thought, she just worked really hard to clean this floor. I think I'll go tell her how awful it is so that she'll get really upset and we can have a great big argument and I can feel better about myself tonight. Once you understand that, Grey Rock is a lot easier to implement and a lot more satisfying. So let me kind of walk you through this. Let's say he or she bursts into the room and says, I thought you were going to clean the floor tonight. Instead of saying, I did, you would say, oh yes, I did. See the difference there? One has a little bit of an emotional rise in it, and the other one is just a statement of fact. And now when they follow it up with, you call that clean? I can't even tell that you've cleaned it. It looks just as dirty as it did before. Normally you'd get defensive and you'd say, I just spent an hour scrubbing it. What are you talking about? Instead of reacting that way, you would say something like, oh, I'll have to do better next time. Just like that. And then you stop talking. This is definitely going to be followed up with more provocation. Maybe something like, where did you learn to clean a floor? I can't believe anybody would clean a floor like that and tell themselves that that was good enough. Instead of continuing to get defensive and say, what do you mean? What's wrong with the way I clean the floor? You would say something like, oh, well, maybe next time you can help me do it differently. And they're going to keep trying to provoke you because you have to understand that the goal of this conversation was to upset you. And where you're not getting upset, it's likely that they're going to keep coming back and trying some more to upset you. And they could possibly get more upset. So they might come back with something like, oh, I doubt that would do any good. It's obviously way too complicated for you to learn how to clean a floor. I might as well do it myself. To which you could say something like, oh, well, if you want to do it next time, that's fine. To which they might start saying something like, are you even listening to me? Do you even care? What's wrong with you? To which you could say something like, I'm listening. Is there anything else you want to say? I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea of the spirit of Grey Rock and how you respond in a non-emotional way without arguing, without countering what they're saying. In fact, you're pretty much agreeing with everything they're saying and you're not expressing any kind of an emotional response to the things that they're accusing you of. I also like the word okay when they say things to you and they go off on a rant or whatever it is. Often it can be very effective to just nod your head and say, okay. Okay. You can also say things like, that's a good point. All right. I'll try harder with that next time. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you felt like that. Oh, I hadn't thought of it like that before. Oh, well, that's an interesting point. If they accuse you of things like, you've never loved me, you don't listen, you never try, you don't care about me, you can say things like, I'll have to work on that. Oh, I didn't realize you felt that way. Or, oh, I'm sorry if I said something that made you feel that way. Instead of trying to argue back, instead of trying to prove a point or refute what they're saying. And by keeping yourself calm and non-defensive, you're in effect catching the ball that they're throwing at you and you're not throwing the ball back. You're catching it, you're nodding, agreeing, and you're not arguing. You're listening to them, you're acknowledging what they're saying, but you're not arguing and you're not allowing the emotions to escalate. Now, as I said a little earlier, I just want to caution you, if this particular person has become accustomed to using you to regulate their emotions and you suddenly cut this off, they can actually become quite dangerous. Their behavior can escalate because they're going to keep trying to provoke you. And the way that they're going to try to do that can escalate and it can become dangerous and it can escalate very quickly. And if there are other people in the household, such as young children, that have been treated fairly well up until that point, it's possible that this person may start using the children for emotional punching bags if they've been used to you and suddenly you're not working for them anymore. You need to understand that these types of people need emotional outlets like this to function. They need a punching bag. They need someone to pick on and to upset in order to regulate their own emotions. Now, where does this leave you? It leaves you in a situation where there's really no perfect answer here. For me, I chose to continue holding on to gray rock, and I'll be honest, part of the reason was just because I was so angry to realize that I was being used as an emotional punching bag. And it really was, as I said earlier, a way of being aggressively calm, sort of the only type of revenge that I had and the only thing that I could really grab control back of. So part of it was done out of anger, to be perfectly honest, but for me it was an extremely effective way of keeping control over my emotions and putting boundaries up and not allowing this person to work me up into hysterics as this person had done to me before. I was able to control my own emotions. So that was still a path that I wanted to take, and gray rock should be a temporary coping mechanism. Gray rock is not a solution to anything. Unless this person isn't causing a lot of mayhem in your life, and there's someone, like I said earlier, a parent or a sibling, or maybe an ex-partner you have a child with that you can't cut contact off completely, then maybe gray rock is just the best that you have. However, if you have any choice in the matter, gray rock is not a permanent solution to anything. It's not perfect, and as I said, it could potentially make things worse. It could potentially cause a dangerous situation for you. So when I was using gray rock, it was a way for me to cope with the situation as I worked a way to escape from the situation. It was a temporary bridge that helped me stay sane in the last weeks of a very traumatic relationship ending. So when people say that gray rock doesn't work, I feel like that's a misunderstanding of the purpose of gray rock, much like the misunderstanding that people have of boundaries. Gray rock isn't really meant to control the behavior of the other person. Yeah, it can get a narcissistic person to leave you alone if you are just too boring for them. But if they're already invested in the relationship, if they already live with you and they're already accustomed to using you to regulate their emotions, going gray rock may eventually get them to leave, but it's also going to cause, like I said, a situation in which the danger is actually escalating before they give up and leave. However, I will say that it is likely that if you hold fast to gray rock, they probably will give up and leave. And they'll probably do it a lot faster than you could ever imagine. But I feel like it would be irresponsible for me not to warn you of the dangers. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and you would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.